So let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to how you got into science fiction and fantasy. Where did it start for you as a kid?
The first sort of what I would call fantasy that I can remember reading, I think was Narnia. I got into The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe at pretty young, maybe like 8, 9-ish, I reckon. And I loved that. And then I also got into, I never played D&D as a kid, but I did read like all the Choose Your Own Adventure books. I absolutely devoured that. I had like a shelf that just,
the green spines, Jackson and Livingstone.
They were white. They were like white with little red blobs. I can picture them really clearly. They were like, I was in the States, so maybe they were different versions.
Of course.
So I grew up in the States. So they were white covers with little red bubbly bubbles on the spine. And I had like dozens of those things. I devoured them. I couldn't get enough of them. I loved them so much, and I read them over and over again to get all the different experiences and all the endings and stuff. So so that really got me into it. And then I think I must have been about 12, I reckon. And in my school library, I found a copy of A Spell for Chameleon by Piers Anthony.
Right.
And I was like, with what I had read up to that point, I was like, well, this looks interesting. I'll read this. And I absolutely loved it. It was just like head over heels. It was like I found my people. Here we are. And so from there after, it was just like I read every Piers Anthony book I could. Like I read all the Xanth books that I could get my hands on, basically, and just loved them. And then so there was a friend of my sister's I used to babysit for. This is a bit convoluted and unnecessary, but anyway, her dad had the Roger Zelazny Amber series, and I used to babysit for them. And so he would loan me the Amber books, and I would read them and then give them back. It was like having a little private library. So I read all the Amber books and loved them. And then who else? I think Terry Brooks was the other one I picked up. And I didn't read Sword of Shannara. For some reason, I got Elfstones of Shannara first. Or Shannara. I've never know how to pronounce that. Shannara.
I say Shannara, but that's just me. I guess, with audiobooks, they can tell you now, but then again,
yeah, true.
We didn't have them back then.
Exactly. So I read Elfstones and really liked that. And that by then I was just like, that was me 100% in. I was absolutely just, that was what I read. And I used to get, I won some book tokens from school for something at one point, and it was like straight up the bridges to what was then Smith's, I think, booksellers, was it? Can't remember. Anyway, and it was like, right, new Piers Anthony, here we go. And then I got into the more sort of advanced. The older I got into the more advanced Piers Anthony stuff, the adult stuff like Incarnations of Immortality and Tarot and Bio of a Space Tyrant, and was like, I'm glad I didn't read these when I was 12. They'd have been quite disturbing.
Yeah, it's like getting to Stephen King too early, and you're like, I'll never sleep again now.
Yeah, exactly. So Piers, and he's kind of, you can probably see that some of them, the Incarnations of Immortality, my original set are still up there.
Nice.
So I've had those for 30 years probably now. So Piers Anthony was my proper gateway drug into just loving fantasy. And I've never gone back and reread them, and I think that's probably good, because I'm not sure how well they would stand up now. And I know there's some real, like, even from my memory, I'm like, there's some real kind of risque, probably kind of problematic stuff. I gave up on the Xanth series at the point where the next book coming out was called The Color of Her Panties. And I was like, really? Maybe not. Okay. I think we've taken this too far, really. Yeah, but he absolutely got me into it, and I really loved his stuff, and it was great when I was a kid. And then I then got much more into like urban fantasy stuff. So I love Neil Gaiman. I read Sandman as it was being printed. A friend of mine gave me Dream of a Thousand Cats when I was about 17, and I was like, I didn't know you could do this with a comic. This is amazing.
Yeah.
And he ended up selling me his entire collection up to that point, and then I kept on buying them as they were coming out.
Yeah.
So I've got a full like first run of Sandman.
It's worth a lot at this point.
Probably, yeah.
Especially the TV series coming now. You're like,
Oh yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't sell them anyway. So I got into that, and then of course I got into his. I loved American Gods. I think American Gods is amazing. And Nancy Boys, and I got really into his novels. But then I came back. I got into stuff like Jasper Fforde and things. This is a very rambling, long answer, isn't it? Sorry. I got into stuff like Jasper Fforde and Tom Holt, and I really liked them. And then I came back to more straight fantasy because I picked up in a bookshop, Last Argument of Kings by Joe Abercrombie.
Yeah.
Because I read the cover and I saw it and I was like, this looks awesome. I want to read this. And only when I got home was I like, it's the third book in a trilogy.
Damn. Shit.
I was like, how have I done this? So I immediately went back to the bookshop and bought the first two as well. And luckily, absolutely loved them. That was like, that was my sort of reintroduction to fantasy as an adult. And I was like, these are amazing. And so Joe got me back into reading more sort of traditional, although very grimdark, obviously. And it just turns out I quite like grimdark. So he got me into reading more of that kind of traditional fantasy from the sort of urban fantasy and comedy stuff I'd been reading. And that kind of brought me full circle.
Wow. So when did you think about, I want to be a writer. I want to actually try and do some of this myself.
There are so many answers to this, and I've never actually pinned down like, here is one that is definitely the answer. So the one I always hark back to is I remember being 9 and being asked to write a side of A4 for a bit of creative writing for school.
Yeah.
And I wrote both sides, and it was basically like an extended scene from a D&D story. And my teacher loved it and had me read it out to the class, and I was like, I like this. I like this, Buzz. This is nice. And then I did the similar thing again. I don't know, 5th or 6th year, I think, where we were reading. I can remember the book. We were reading a book for school called Collision Course for, I think it was higher English, and we were asked to, as a creative writing exercise, write a new final chapter. So write another chapter after the chapter that had finished it. I did that, and again, the teacher asked me to read it out to the class, and a couple of my friends were just like, that was really good. And I was like, oh, okay. But at the same time, I've always said I had this kind of glass ceiling in my head that like, no, you can't do that. You're not. Special people become creative artists and writers and actors and things like that. So that's there's a whole process you have to go through. You have to know people and stuff, and you can't do that. And so it took me years, and then at university, first of all, a friend and I tried to put together, he's an artist, and I wrote a comic script, and he did some samples of it based on a live role play thing we'd done, which was, Vampire the Masquerade.
Yeah, I remember that.
Years.
I remember that.
We did a live role play of Vampire the Masquerade, and then he had come up with an idea for some characters and stuff based on the character he played. And I was like, well, hey, why don't I write that and you draw it? And we'll see what happens. So we put together this whole package and posted it off to Vertigo, who, like, he was the one who gave me the Sandman comic as well. It's the same guy. I'm like, we'll send it off to Vertigo and see what happens. And literally nothing happened. Absolute silence. We never heard from them. It was just like we'd thrown it at a wall and it had disappeared. It was like, okay, I guess that's not going to happen. But I guess by that point, I was like, I don't know if I took it very seriously. I was also kind of acting. I was in the university theatre company. I'd been doing sort of amateur theatre since I was about 16. And I was kind of more focused on thinking acting would be fun at that point.
Right. Interesting.
So that kind of had more my attention. The writing was more a kind of, that'd be fun. That'd be nice. But I remember having this notion that, like, I love Batman. And I remember having this notion in the back of my head, like, I would love to be sitting in a New York cafe, drinking coffee and discussing the next Batman issue I was going to write with my editor. It was just like, I had this real kind of weird singular vision of, that would be so nice. That would be such fun. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I suppose that was in my head then. But I started writing a novel that was I was doing an English degree, and I wrote this really pretentious thing that was like, I had just read The Wasteland. And so I was like, oh, and Tristram Shandy. I just read The Wasteland and Tristram Shandy. I was like, I'm going to do something that kind of combines these. It's going to be really weird and off the wall. And it's going to be like, unreliable narrator. And it's going to be kind of a collection of short stories, but with a self-aware narrator. It's going to be really mad. Nobody's ever done this. And I wrote, like, I don't know, maybe 10,000 words of it, maybe 15, and showed it to one of my English professors. And he was like, keep writing? I don't know what else to say about something like this. Just keep writing. And I was like, well, that's a worry. So yeah, with a few years of distance from it, I can look back and go, I remember saying to my mom, no, the thing I'm writing, it's never going to be a bestseller. It's not going to be that kind of book. And my mom was like, well, write a bestseller instead.
Mum was right.
Okay, thanks, Mum. Yeah, that's good advice. Why didn't I think of that? So yeah, and then I started writing Carpe Diem in my sort of, I guess, mid-20s, I think, probably at that point.
Right.
And I had an idea that came to me from, it was actually, so it was, again, we go back to Sandman and Neil Gaiman have been quite a lot of kind of inspirational moments in my life. It's the end of Calliope, which I think is issue 17, where a writer whose name I want to say is Richard Maddox, but I'm probably wrong, but that's what it is in my memory. Anyway, he's punished by Dream and cursed with a constant flow of ideas that he has to constantly get out of his head, and it gets quite horrific. He ends up like writing them on the wall in his own blood from his fingernails because he's just scratching ideas on the wall. And there were these mad ideas, and they were just really great. They were like, you know, somebody who wins the 17th of December 1883 in a card game, and I was like, that's brilliant. What does that mean? Like, what do they get for that? What do they actually own? Like, can they go back in time and live in that day anytime they want? Can they just visit it and live that day over and over and over again and do whatever they want? Or like, do they get a day in a bottle that plays like a video or something? You know, it's like, I love that idea. So I kind of was all these mad ideas. And I remember walking to the shops one day, and I had this, at this point, I'd taken to carrying around this little, it shows you how old it was. It was a little cassette tape dictaphone I was carrying around in my pocket.
Nice.
And I came up with that scene, and I was like, a hermit whose living room carpet is the center of a bet between God and Satan. That's a cool idea. I like that. I didn't know what the hell else I was going to do with that. I just liked the idea.
Yeah.
And then the character of Simon came to me, and I was like, ooh, okay. And when I sat down and started writing, I was just like, build this character, it's gonna be fine, great. And I just did a load of like info dump character building at the beginning of it, and you know, very little story. And after I'd written about 20,000 words of it, I had a massive crisis of confidence and was like, I don't know if this is any good. What am I going to do with this? So the logical thing I did was I found out who Neil Gaiman's agent was.
Oh no!
And I emailed her, and she read it, and she asked for the rest of it, and I hadn't written it.
Oh no!
And I was like, oh God. And I look back at that now, and I'm just like, oh, you absolute doofus. I can't believe you did that. That is just, you like, wasted such an, and she still said, you know, well, when you finish it, get back to me.
Yeah.
And it took me forever to finish. So what then happened was I entered this script writing competition with the BBC. I did quite well. I got to the finals, and I ended up being a runner-up. And that made me focus more on script writing. So I kind of forgot about the book and went off into script writing.
Right.
And I did loads of script writing and stuff. And I finally came back to it and was like, right, I've actually got time to sit down. And it was like over a decade later. And I was like, I'm going to finish this book. I'm actually going to finish this book. Anyway, I finally like sat down and wrote it and finished it. And of course, by the time I'd done that, like she still remembered me, like his agent still remembered me, but she was like, you know, she's working in children's publishing now and it's no longer her thing. And I was just like,
yeah,
you doofus. I can't believe you. I just can't believe you did that. It's just like, I am literally like a lesson in how not to do something, basically. How not to kick off your writing career. Just do that. So, but yeah, there we go. So that's kind of the story of how, at which point in all that I kind of decided I wanted to write. I don't know. I kind of just, it was always kind of the back of my head. I think the fact as well that, so what I was professionally, what I was doing was I was working in different little small publishing companies and stuff like that, where I was gradually doing more and more writing and editing and less admin. It started out very admin-y, and then I was doing more editing and more writing.
Yeah.
And I was doing stuff like, you know, I was editing like, you know, transport magazines or, you know, guidebooks to fishing and golf in Scotland. And, you know, the one I did was, I was the writer and editor for a guidebook to Edinburgh.
Right.
Like a kind of tourist guide to Edinburgh. And that was really good fun. I enjoyed that. And I learned so much about the city, which has kind of fed into how I built the world of Eden for Lost War, because I knew so much about old stories about the city and kind of the etymology of place names and stuff. So I learned a lot of that then. But yeah, I'd always been, you know, professionally writing and editing for, you know, roughly, I guess, about 15 years. I
was going to say, yeah, because
was finally published.
Because, you know, from looking at what you've done, and And you said you've done all these different magazines and this one and that one and scripts. And I thought, so, you know, my day job is marketing, and it's quite a different muscle, but it's still writing. And it means that some days when I sit down to try and write the book, I'm just like, I'm just too tired. It's not the same kind of writing. But were you having that kind of thing where you'd be like, oh, I don't feel like it. I don't feel like
it. Absolutely. When you spend all day being creative, and you at the end of the day you sit down and you're like, right, work on my stuff now, and your brain's just like, no. It's like you have used all the energy I had for that today. I think there's a story that might be apocryphal, but I think it was Charles Dickens, who I believe worked as a clerk.
I think he did, yeah.
And I've heard the story that basically he apparently said at some point that he took a sort of boring, menial, brainless job because anything that used his creativity would have sapped his creative energy for doing his own writing. So he didn't want to be doing another job that actually took some of his creative energy from him and made it harder for him to write when he sat down to write. And I think there's something in that.
Yeah.
I think there is something in that.
I can say this because I know we're of a similar age, before we talked, but when I was in my 20s, I could work all day, come home, stay up all night playing, you know, games or writing, have very little sleep, get up to work and do that 5 days a week, and then do all of you want a weekend and just keep doing it. And now I'm no longer in my 20s or my 30s. It's not quite as easy to maintain the same pace. So I have a certain amount of energy and brain power to do it.
No, you're, I mean, it's true. The older you get, the more you're like, nah, man, I'm beat. I gotta go to bed. Like, I know I'd love to stay up drinking till 5 o'clock, but like it's 11:30 and I'm done, man. Just...
On a school night.
Exactly. You know, but I mean, New Year's Eve and Halloween, like, we've got friends who have an epic Halloween party every year, and you know, every now and again I can do it and just like, hey, crash through, it'd be great. But no, it's just, I mean, I remember, like, as you say, like, I remember when I was like 18, and I was funnily enough working as an insurance clerk at that point. And I remember being out till like 5 a.m, getting back to my mate's flat at 6, and getting up and being in work at 10 o'clock, still half cut. And being perfectly capable of functioning. I do remember one day, I overdid it. I remember one day, this is by this where you hand wrote memos with carbon copy paper underneath, so you had a copy of them. I remember one day looking at a memo I'd written in the morning and the afternoon, being like, what the hell does that say? I don't know what I wrote there.
I wrote it.
But we're going to go back and do this again because I can't read it. So if I can't read it, the guy who's receiving it isn't going to read it either. But yeah, you can't do it anymore, man. It's just, you know, a 3-day hangover when you've had, you know, nothing to drink. It's ridiculous.
I remember the days of doing role playing. You start at like 7 o'clock and you'd be going in the evening, and you start and the sun's coming up and it's like, oh, wow, it's like 5 a.m. Okay, I think we should probably stop now.
Yeah. There was me and my mate Sean used to go to this club called The Mission in Edinburgh, and it chucked out over the summer at 5 a.m. And so it would literally be light as we were walking down the road to go back and stay at our mate's flat. So we'd go in the light at, like, you know, in Edinburgh in the summer, it's like, it's only dark for a couple of hours, basically. Yeah. It's like, it gets dark around, like, you know, back of 11, and it's light by like between 4 and 5 in the morning. So we'd go in the light and come out in the light. We'd never see the dark at all. And it was just easy. Our bodies just did it. They just, like, you know, processed everything. And now it's just like, I've thrown my back out lying on the floor, man. It's just, you know, it doesn't work anymore.
Remember, kids, enjoy your youth while you can. Stretch now. You will appreciate it later. Do yoga. That's what I do. To keep my back fit. Yeah. Absolutely. Anyway, enough about getting old. So when did you actually finish Carpe Diem?
Oh God. So it must have been round about I finished a proper first draft of it. I was living in France at the time.
Yeah.
With my wife and my stepkids. And so it must have been, I reckon, around about 2011. Okay. Maybe 2012. And then I spent a few years working on it. We moved back to Edinburgh in 2012. It was eventually published by a small press called Wild Wolf in 2015. Right. So it took a few years of me fiddling with it and doing edits on it. the way I wrote it was bad, because I was writing it the way I did most things, which was being perfectionist about it, and therefore I was trying to edit as I was going, and so I was ending up editing the same bits and not writing new stuff, which is a large part of the reason why it took so long to write. So yeah, don't do that either. That's a really bad way to do things. There are some writers who can do that. There are some writers who can write and edit as they go. I think Pete McLean does that, where he basically edits as he goes, and pretty much when he finishes a draft, that's what goes to his agent. I think
Dean Koontz, he'll write a chapter 20, 30 times until he's happy with it, and then he'll move on. And so that when he gets to the end of his first draft, it's so clean, he doesn't need to do much, work after, which I find insane. I just can't fathom that.
Well, I had to mentally choose to switch, and I say a lot of it was my wife telling me I really had to. She was absolutely right. So saying, look, get the first draft down. You're not allowed to go back and edit anything. Like, you write it, you move on. You write it, you move on.
Yep.
I was like, yeah, okay. And so that's how I wrote The Lost War, and it was much quicker and much more efficient. And I got a first draft of that done much quicker, in like, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 months maybe, from beginning to end. And that was 150K, whereas Carpe Diem was only like 96. So that was, I mean, I suppose if you look at when I started to finish Carpe Diem, anything's quicker than 15 years. So it was a much quicker process. So yeah, I've had to move to that process now, where I just write an entire first draft and get the story down and get it out of my head. As I say,
right.
I'm not good at making notes. I'm not good at plotting much in advance. I know where it ends, and I know things I want to hit along the way.
Yeah.
And then I write. And so it's all got to come out of my head. And, I find that the more you get stuff out, or the more I get stuff out of my head, the more stuff comes. But I got to get it down first. Otherwise, I'm stuck on the thing that I'm thinking about. And I'm thinking, oh, well, but what am I going to do after this? And so I've just got to trust that once I've written this down and I've made space in my head, more stuff will come. And so far, that has worked.
Are you always battling with other ideas as well, trying to like, oh, you should do this instead, or how about this idea, whilst you're trying to focus on the one thing?
Oh my God, never mind, like other books entirely. Like, oh my God, yeah. So I'm like, I'm trying to, back a few months, I was trying to write the end of book 2, what is now book 2. It was going to be a trilogy. Now it's a quadrilogy, because I realized it was just way too long, and it was going to be some ridiculous number of words to finish this, what was supposed to be the middle book. So, so I'm trying to write like the end of what is now book 2. And I'm like in the shower having ideas for book 4. And I'm like, this is not helpful, brain. Stop feeding me ideas for 2 books down the line. This is not what I need. And I've got ideas for like 3 or 4 options for what I'm going to write when I've finished Eden, and I've written the sequel to Carpe Diem, which I've started that. I've written like 15, 20,000 words of that. So I've started that. So I know what my next like 4 books are. And I've already got like 3 or 4 ideas for what I'm going to write after them. And every now and again, I find myself wandering off thinking about them. And I'm like, this is not helpful. I need to actually think about the book I'm writing.
Totally the same. My book's out, the sequel's done. I've written the one after that. I've then got to write the next 2 of the trilogy. And I know what the first book is of the one after that. And my brain's currently going, ooh, you should work on that now. I'm like, no, finish the thing you're doing. Edit that and then work on the next one. Don't try and come up with character, but keep going, oh, that character's interesting. I could do that with him. Yeah. I have to write the notes down and try and expunge it and kind of exercise it out of my brain. And hopefully that just won't then go add more stuff to it.
Oh, maybe that's what I should do, actually. Maybe I should write down. See, you think I would have learned by now. Maybe I should write down the ideas for the other books and just like keep a file of them somewhere. And when I think of something new, I can just write it in, and then I can. The other thing is,
when you come back, when you actually get to the point where you want to work on that idea, and you look at it, if it's still good, great. If not, you can improve on what you've done, because that's another thing from Dean Koontz I picked up from years ago. So he doesn't plan his books at all. This is what he used to do. I don't know if he does it anymore. He'd have like a file of index cards, and he'd write a sentence or a couple of words, and that would be an idea for a book, and he'd put them in a drawer. And every time he got one, he'd write it and put it in a drawer. And once he's finished his book, he opens his drawer, goes through the cards, and finds an idea that he likes and goes, oh, that's quite interesting. And if the other ones aren't as good, just moves past them until he finds one that he likes and goes, ooh, puts that down. Chapter 1. And he starts writing the next one. That's how he does it. And I'm just like, I've kind of taken that and gone, oh, that's a brilliant thing for that character. And I put it on a post-it or some bit of paper, and then I type it up and add it into a file. And then when I come back to write that book, sometimes I go, yeah, sometimes skip that one, go to the next book, next series, next book.
I must do that. Actually, I'm so scatterbrained. I mean, I've got like, the thing is as well, I like to make notes on paper. So like I've got a notebook that I actually sit down with and handwrite notes out on, because I find it, I don't know, what do I find it? I find it a bit more tactile, and I just like it, I think. I think it probably goes back to our age, is that, you know, we grew up having to write stuff down on paper. And so it feels more kind of like, I don't know, you can just kind of scroll stuff out, and you're not typing it down, and you're not going to go back and delete it, and you can draw arrows around things, and you know. So I tend to handwrite stuff, but then of course I lose it. Like, where's that page? Where's that page with that idea I had? What was I going to do with that character? I had an idea for her. What was I going to do with her? Wait, it's in this notebook, I think.
No, edit, search, find.
Exactly. So I've got to actually start doing it on the computer and putting notes into the computer where I can go and find them again and actually go, that's what I was going to do with her. Yeah, that's right. That was my idea. Yeah.
So tell me about The Lost War. Tell me how it started. You said you don't plan your books, but what was the core of that book and then now 4-book series?
So it was 3 things. The most important thing, the book I knew I wanted to write next was, and I can't say too much about exactly what it is, because it'll be a spoiler. But basically the ending was the point of the book.
Right.
So like the whole premise was, I want to write a book where this is the case, because it's an allegory for a thing.
Yep.
And I can't say a lot more than that.
No.
But so that was the book I wanted to write. And I'd had an idea for a long time that I wanted to write a book in a fantasy kingdom that was based on Edinburgh, because Edinburgh has this great, it's got a load of like, you know, mythological history to it. It's got a lot of great actual history to it. And even just like the etymology of the place names are interesting. And they fed into a lot of the world building that I did in terms of, you know, various different things. And like the White Thorns came from the fact that Balerno, the place that they're based, the Gaelic translation, I think it's Bailernich. I apologize to any Gaelic speaker, I can't speak Gaelic. Literally translates to something like place of the hawthorns, and hawthorns have thorns and white roses, and so they were. I think that's all right. This is all from memory. Right. I've got it written down somewhere. And so they became this religious order of the White Thorns, because that all came. So I did love that. And then the third thing was that I had these characters that friends and I had role played for years that I really loved. They were great characters, and I really particularly loved my character and my wife's character, who are Aranok and Landria, who are the 2 sort of main characters in The Lost War. And I really wanted to write a story with those characters. And as I've said elsewhere, basically when I realized those were all one story, when I realized, I was like, wait, that's my plot, there's my world, and there's my characters. This is the book. This is what it is. And it all came together, and I was like, yes, this is it. So that's kind of where it all came from.
And when did you start writing that? Because you said you did it a lot faster than Carpet Diem. So in the last couple of years.
And that's an interesting story. So I started writing the sequel to Carpet Diem.
Yep.
And I was struggling, not least because I was excited about the idea of The Lost War. And I just was constantly like, that was constantly pulling at me and pulling, like, you know, it was over here going, write me. And my wife kind of probably rightly was saying, you know, yeah, but Carpet Diem's doing quite well. The smart thing to do is write the sequel to Carpet Diem. And I was like, okay, yeah, you're right. She's like, write that and then write the other book. I was like, yeah, okay. I kept trying to write. I was just like getting nowhere. I was really frustrated. I was still working full time at that point as well. So I was also like, my energy and my time for writing it was not great. And so it was like, oh, I'm trying to write. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't get into it. And I was like, do you know what? I think I might just go and write this other book, because it's just, I'm excited about that. And I think I have to write that. Or I'm never going to write anything else, because I've got to do this one. She's like, yeah, okay. And that just, it kind of poured out of me. It was like, it was wow. It just, you know, came out. And so that was much quicker. And by the time I was writing that, I was able to write full time, because I'd set up in business with a friend of mine who came to me with a proposal to basically set up to fund a company to let me write full time for publishing my stuff, which meant that I was in a position to write full time. So I was writing full time. So I do think it was like 4 or 5, maybe 6 months at most.
Wow, that's fast.
That I was able to write the first proper draft of it, and I was pretty happy with the first draft of it. I think I only did one edit. My wife reads my first drafts and gives me feedback. An edit on that, and then it went to like beta readers and my editor. Edit on that, second edit, proofreader out, and so the whole process from like properly starting it to publishing it was like a year.
And you wanted to self-publish it yourself straight away? You didn't think about any other?
I considered it, but it was mostly about, I mean, with the position that I was in, with being able to do it myself, I mean, you know, with my background in publishing, I had a lot of knowledge about publishing in terms of the sort of technical side of it, basically. I hadn't worked in fiction publishing, so I didn't know a lot about that side of it. And the stuff that I worked on didn't have a lot to do with marketing. So that was not, you know, that was something I had to learn, basically. Yeah. And I think it came to it at the right time, because I mean, what we did was we took back the rights to Carpe Diem from the publishers with, and we republished that ourselves. And that was cool. We got a new cover on it. It got a gentle re-edit, and it really was a gentle re-edit. It was more like a re-proofread, just to pick up some stuff that had got missed the first time. And there was a little gentle edit, but not a lot. It's largely the same book that was published the first time around, basically. So we republished that, and the only thing I considered at that point was because my experience with Carpe Diem was, so I subbed Carpe Diem for quite a long time, and I got a lot of very positive, gracious rejections, basically,
nice.
From agents. And so this time around I was like, well, do I spend a year doing this again, or do I just publish this myself and see how we can do with it? And so that was the decision, was basically, I showed it to one editor, one agent who liked it, but just not enough to take it on. He wasn't taking on new clients. And I was like, okay, well, he had given me a really nice, he had given me a lot of really good feedback when I subbed Carpe Diem to him. And he gave me a lot of time. Yeah. And it was John Gerald. It was John Gerald who was who ended up being my editor instead of my agent on Lost War. And he was just, I mean, John is, you know, to see him on Twitter to see how generous he is with his time and how, you know, giving he is back to the writing community. That, you know, he was such a nice guy and so knowledgeable. I thought, well, look, what I'll do is I'll show it to John and see what he thinks. And as I say, he became my editor rather than my agent. And that was that. So yeah, I think a lot of it was kind of impatience, kind of knowing I had the wherewithal to do it myself. But in doing that, what I learned is that I really hate marketing. And it takes up so much time.
Oh yeah.
That I'd rather be writing. And you know, that whole, you know, figuring out, I mean, I do okay through Facebook ads. Figuring out Amazon ads is like some kind of cryptic black magic as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is just like, I don't know what works with this. I've got a little kind of network of small chat group of other self-published authors that I've known for, like, you know, going back to Carpe Diem being published. And we swap notes and we talk a lot, and most of them are not in the fantasy genre. Only a couple of them are actually in fantasy. There's a few of them that are in crime and stuff like that. And we swap notes on what's working and what's not working and stuff, and support each other. But it takes so much time and so much effort and so much energy that, you know, I'd rather be writing. And so that just is a massive appeal to the notion of not having to do that. That would be really nice if somebody who knew what they were doing did that instead. That would be great. Yeah,
one less thing for you to worry about, along with it, you know, everything else going on.
Exactly, because I mean, as a self-published author, you have to be so much more than just an author. you are your own marketing department and your own PR, and you've got to essentially be the overseeing editor who deals with the editor, the proofreader, the cover designer. You got to buy an ISBN. I mean, just all this stuff that is like, so much more than just writing. You've essentially got to be an author and a business person.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of your time away from the creative act of actually just writing and editing stories.
And the only worst thing is, more complicated thing is, when I went to France and met some French authors over there, I realized that there are no agents in publishing in France.
Oh, right.
So I spoke to a lot of the authors, and they was like, yeah, there's no agent. We deal with the publishers direct. So they have to do all of the contract stuff themselves. And if they want to, get a lawyer to help them read it and this, that, and the other, I was like, what? You have to do all that on addition to everything else? I'm like, yep. So that's, it's even more complicated for French authors. Yikes. So
I didn't know that. I didn't know that agents didn't exist over there. Wow.
That's what they were telling me when I was at the festival. And I was just kind of like, wow, that's a lot more weight as well to worry about in addition to anything else. And anyway.
That's it. So, I mean, also as a self-published author, you've got to, you're constantly doing stuff like you've got to go and read all your reviews, because you've got to try and pick out the good reviews to use snippets of in your marketing, and you've got to keep an eye on your sales, and you've got to watch how the sales are going on a daily basis, so you can decide whether you need to tweak the advertising that you're doing, and all of that just drains you of time and energy that you could be spending on other stuff.
Yeah, working on the next book,
Exactly that.
So then we come on to the self-published fantasy blog off that was started by Mark Lawrence in 2015.
Yeah.
How did you get involved in this? For those who don't know, about it.
So I became aware of it. I guess back in, it must have been 2008. It would have been 2018, which was when we had just set up the company ourselves. We'd just taken the rights to Carpet Diem back and published it myself, and I came across this, and I was like, I knew very little about it. I think it was quite close to the deadline that I found out about it for entering, and I was like, can't hurt, why not? At that point I was like trying all different kinds of things as to what might be good ways of kind of getting the word out about it. I was like, sure, why not? I'll put this in for this. I've published it myself now. It's no longer with a small press, so it should be perfectly fine to enter this, and so it was. So yeah, I entered it, and it bombed out straight away.
Right.
Like first round, one of the first rounds of cuts. I was out before I knew I was out, basically. So I was like, oh well, that's that then. That didn't come to much.
Oh well,
I guess that wasn't that good an idea after all. So then I followed it, and I was thinking about the Lost War. I was thinking, I wonder if that might do better for being a slightly different style of fantasy. Maybe I'd get more attention and get picked up with maybe pick up a review or two with it. That'd be great. So I was going to try and put it. So I published Lost War in 2019, and I was going to try and put it in 2019, but I actually missed the window. I published it slightly too late. It wasn't ready in time.
Right.
And that retrospectively was probably a very good thing, because it meant I wasn't in against Sword of Kaigen, so which is probably beneficial in general, considering that I don't think I've ever heard a bad word said about that book by anybody. So I think possibly I had a little bit of fortune there that it wasn't ready to go in that year. And I just thought, well, I'll put it in next year. We'll see what happens. It'll be, and I'd had a few good reviews from some well-known bloggers by that point. Petrik at Novel Notions had picked it up and done a really great review of it for me, and all off the back of I have to say, of Anna Stevens, who was brilliant and read it for me and gave a review of it, and that was what started getting attention. Basically, Anna was brilliant. She was such a massive support in getting it kicked off. So Petrik picked it up, and then Alex at Spells and Spaceships, his blog was pretty new at that point and has become great because he's a really good reviewer. He's a really he does really in-depth takes on stuff, and he really thinks about the stuff that he's reviewing, and he does some really great stuff. And so I was one of the earliest things I think he did on his site, and he really loved it. And so I'd had some really good reviews so far already, and I was feeling pretty positive about it. And I thought, well, I'll put it in. I'll see what happens. And I made the book nest shortlist for the best self-published book of 2019 as well.
Nice.
And so I was feeling like, oh, okay, this is going in the right direction. This is nice. So I put it in thinking, it'd be great if it just gets some. I mean, anything above getting turfed out in the first round.
I do better last time. It's a win.
At that point, that's it. It's like if I do better, if I'm in it for more than a month this time, I've improved. I'm going in the right direction. And so when I made the semi-finalist out of my little group in Booknest, that was great. And as a Scot, we're not used to getting out of the group stages of any competition, so that was very exciting to get out of the group stages of the competition. And so made it to the semis and was like, this is amazing. And then when I made the finals, I was like, oh my god, like all right, this is so much better than I expected. This is amazing. And then I started getting people telling me like, oh, I think you might win. I was like, nah, shut up. No.
Nah.
And then like my two early scores were really high. And I was like, oh my God. Like, I don't know if this is good or bad, because like getting those two really good scores early on is like, what if everybody else now like hates it because they have like high expectations of it and doesn't live up to their expectations. And so, it's like, is it a good or a bad thing to have two good high scores right from the beginning? I don't know. Is this going to be, there's a lot of people who like, hype puts them off things, or they just,
true.
And I was like, oh God. So and you can, as a writer, you can tie yourself in knots about how things can go wrong and how people can not like your book and what you might have done differently and what you might have done wrong. And so it was like, it was, I mean, I think essentially I was in front from the beginning, but it never felt like that. It felt like at any time, like, one bad review was going to come in, and that was, it felt so fragile that it was a great experience and a massive buzz. But I think all of the finalists would probably tell you the same. It was really great and really good fun, and also stressful as hell. It was a real double-edged sword. You're like, 'cause on the one hand, you're like, God, I want some reviews to come out for my book, and on the other hand, you're like, oh my God, there's a review out for my book. What if it's terrible? So it was a real double-edged sword, that one. But overall, it was a great experience getting to know the other finalists and stuff. We've still got a little Discord server where we all chat. Not as much now as we used to. We used to chat fairly daily while the competition was active, but we still play that every now and then. But yeah, it's been really nice. They're all, I consider them all mates now, and we chat now and again. And we had a little virtual drinks party after the competition finished and everything. So it was a mad experience to go from one book bombing out straight away to winning the whole thing. It's like that's two extremes of experience. It's just mad.
And did you see an immediate uptick as the competition went on, of people paying you attention and looking at your blog and website and buying the book and all that kind of stuff? Were you seeing, because of it, you're seeing sales go up because you're monitoring them yourself?
Absolutely, definitely. I mean, there was definitely a bit of an uptick in sales in general over the period. Once I was a finalist, over the sort of 6 months where the finalist part of the competition was running, there was definitely kind of an elevated level of consistent sales across that time. But then when I won it, it spiked. There was an absolute definable spike after that, and it has stayed higher ever since. So it's had a very tangible and obvious effect on sales. And then, other reviewers have picked it up on the back of that. And, there's some big viewers, some big reviewers, have picked it up. And I've seen a spike in sales and been like, I wonder what that was. And then a few days later, I find this review that went out 2 days before, and I'm like, oh, that's where that came from.
Like some of the biggest booktubers have reviewed it, like Daniel Greene reviewed it on his channel, and I saw that and I was like, hey, that'll be good for attention.
It definitely, there was literally a substantial spike that day. Like the day that review dropped, there was a spike in sales. So I mean, it's that direct. Reviewers do have that kind of ability. If they really like a book, they can really spike sales, and it's amazing. It's wonderful that they do it.
And you won the whole competition, and show us, what did you get as well? The prize.
It only arrived today, actually.
Perfect timing.
I've been busy all day. I haven't even had a chance to
Look at
Mark and
this.
say thanks, but I will contact Mark before this goes out and say thanks. But yes, there we go. It's
Fantastic.
I believe it's called a selfie stick. It is in fact Dumbledore's wand.
Excellent.
With a handwritten tag from Mark saying, yeah, so it's awesome. I'll have to get a nice picture with it and send it to Mark.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
For the SPFBO board, so then we'll see it. But yeah, so that literally arrived in the post this morning.
Brilliant.
So,
and the story isn't over there. Things have happened since you won the competition.
So off the back of that, I've now signed up to be represented by Ian Drury of Shield Land, who is also, amongst other writers, Mark Lawrence's agent. And we'll see what happens next, I guess. We'll see where it goes from here. I mean,
watch this space.
It's, exactly. I mean, it's kind of like, well, I don't know what happens next. For me, I have written the first draft of book 2, and I will be doing the first edit on that starting probably next week. I'm doing some prep work this week. I'm doing an interview with. I'm actually doing the interviewing this time for Chimera, the Edinburgh's SFF festival. That's this weekend, which actually, I say it's this weekend. If this comes out on Monday, it will have just happened.
Yep.
The weekend before. But so I'm actually interviewing for that. So I'm doing some prep work for that this week and sort of being ready to do that. But as of next week, I'm going to be back to just editing book 2, and I'm just going to work through it, and we'll see what happens.
Excellent. Yeah. Onwards and see where, book 3, book 4.
Exactly. I mean, it's good to know that even if nothing comes of it, I still have the option to just, do it myself. So it's, it'll come out one way or another. I'm not in that position. Like I know some authors have been in horrible positions where they've signed like a 3 or 4 book deal with a publisher, and then sales have not been as the publisher hoped for the first book or 2 maybe, and they just drop the series, and then they can't do anything with it. They can't go and publish it themselves, so the series just ends up unfinished. I mean, I'm in the position where if nothing comes of this, if it doesn't land with a publisher, then I just go back and do it myself. So the story comes out one way or another, basically.
Well, yeah, everything you've learned from all of this, adds up to experience and make it better, move forward, and all the work you put in and all the marketing and all of that stuff,
Yeah, it's all still there. Yeah. All still there. Having to deal with Facebook ads platform, man.
Oh God. No. So we had some questions, some fun questions. There's a question about you having a football career. What is this? What? Tell me about this.
I've accidentally worn an appropriate T-shirt.
Lovely.
If you can see, that's a football pitch on the screen.
Okay, nice.
What? Yes, that's it.
You had a career in football?
My dad, I didn't really. No, my dad had a football career. My dad was a professional football player. And so I grew up very much with kind of football in my blood. There's an old family story that apparently I kicked a ball before I could walk. Unfortunately, I did not inherit dad's talent, so I was never a professional. But I played it a lot as a kid. And so I know the guy that asked you that. I used to play with him on an Aberdeen supporters team,
right?
Wittily called, wait for it, Inter Milan.
Oh God. Fantastic.
Or IML as it was called for short. So I played for IML for probably, I mean, it feels like 10 years, sort of late 20s to late 30s. It might not have been, I don't know, it might not have been that long, but I played for them, and it was great fun. A really great bunch of guys that I'm still mates with, and we still, like, if we get to Aberdeen games, we quite often, in fact, we've got a supporters club from the club where we get like tickets together for like big games at Hampden and stuff. So I still meet up with them and see them, and yeah, James is one of them. So, well,
now that things are opening up again, you start to go out and do this kind of thing, exactly. Outdoor thing. That's
exactly. I'm really looking forward to that. Actually, I'm looking forward to getting back up to Pataudry. We used to. So being down in Edinburgh, it's a hike to get up to Pataudry for games. It's like a 3-hour drive.
Right.
So I don't get up as often, but I've always been going up for the European games in the summer because we've been qualifying for Europe every year, and so we've been going up for the European games sort of July, August, especially if my son's still off school. I take him up because it doesn't matter if he's up late; he can just sleep in the car and sleep in the morning because it's summer holidays. So it doesn't matter. So we've been going up for the European games, and I think they might come a bit too soon for everything to have properly opened up again. I'm not convinced that the early part of the season we will be able to get into grounds again yet, but I'm looking forward to it. And in the meantime, Scotland are in Euro 2020, and we haven't been in a tournament since 1998, so it's amazing. I can't wait.
Yeah,
I've got that to look forward to.
I'm just glad we can go out and do things, you know. Again,
it's true. Actually, yes,
that's such a relief. Such a relief.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I mean, even just we've been booking things like, you know, I'm booked to go to FantasyCon down in Birmingham.
Just down the road here.
Yeah, there you go.
September.
So like, it's end of September, isn't it? Yeah.
24th, 26th September, I think. Yeah. Jury's in Birmingham.
Are you going? Have you been that close? Are you going to go there?
RJ's going. He's trying to persuade me to go in person, so I'm thinking about it. I'll probably go. I'll probably go.
Listen, my wife even wants to come because like the idea of a trip to Birmingham seems like an exotic travel now. So
after a year and a half of lockdown, Birmingham. Exactly. Ooh, the sunny shores of Birmingham.
Exactly. So my wife's like, I'm going to come with you, and I'm like, yeah, fine.
She'll go shopping, and you'll be stuck at the con indoors.
No, she wants to. She'll want to come to the con. She'll be hanging.
Oh, nice.
Con. She'll love it. Yeah, she'll love it.
Excellent.
So she's like, yeah, let's. I want to come, and I'm like, oh, okay, why not? But yeah, we've booked a couple of tickets for like gigs happening later in the year. We've booked for a gig in Glasgow for I think October. And I'm prepared for them not to happen. Like they might not happen, and I recognize all of that might not happen.
Yeah.
But the fact that there's even a possibility it might is just like, that's nice. It's starting to feel kind of real again, and that, you know, that we can actually get back to the world, which has felt very small for the last like 18 months.
It's felt like it's just been really, really peculiar. Going out and doing really ordinary things that you wouldn't even think about, doing them now, it's just a bit of a stretch. I don't know. It's an odd thing.
I know. I mean, we had friends over to visit at the weekend who we literally hadn't seen since substantially before lockdown, in fact. And we used to see them quite regularly. And their daughter and our son are great friends. They've known each other since they were like 4 or 5 years old. And it was like we were talking about the fact like we have to relearn how to socialize. We have to relearn how to talk to each other because it's been so long since I sat in the room with human beings I'm not related to.
Yeah.
That you know, it's like, wow, this is weird. We have to figure out how to do this all over again. And so, but it's good. I mean, if you're going to do that, do it with good friends, you know. So we've got a couple of sets of friends. We're going for dinner with some friends on Friday, and then another set of friends on Saturday, and but it is going to be like we're going to have to relearn how to relate to people,
do everything,
socialize with people. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, a con like FantasyCon is going to be. I don't know what it's going to be like. I don't know how it's going to work. Is everybody just going to feel really strange? Are we all going to have to be wearing masks? Like, I don't know. But it's nice to see there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, definitely. Virginia wanted to know, what is up with your Twitter photo? It looks like you're a serial killer from 1913.
Yeah. So it's about time this came out. So me and Keanu Reeves are in fact immortal. We've been hanging around.
He is, Jesus. We've
been hanging around for the last couple of hundred years, and secret's out. Do you know, it's funny I said that, actually. I was in Florence many years ago for my honeymoon, for my first marriage, and in, I think it was Michelangelo's house, there was a sculpture of a head, and my God, it was my double. And I was like,
from the dawn of time,
that's creepy. Like Michelangelo made a bust of not a bust, like a sculpture of my head. However many hundred years, I was like, that's weird. No,
Highlander.
I'm not French enough.
True. Or Spanish.
Exactly. Technically Egyptian
Spaniard. Yeah.
Egyptian Spaniard.
From Scotland.
Funny enough, the friends that were here at the weekend, my friend Greg is a photographer, and the thing that he does is Victorian glass plate photography. So he has these really old Victorian cameras, and they take the photo onto literally a glass plate.
Like daguerreotypes, is that what they're called? The really old school ones.
Maybe.
Right.
I should know this.
Check with them later. Let's say it is.
I think they might be called tin type. I want to say.
Okay, all right.
I forget. Greg has talked me through this so many times, and so he does these photos. He does these Victorian tin type wet plate photos. I think that's the right terminology. And he has a business. He does that. It's called what's it called? Dark box images. And he, funnily enough, he was actually at the last minute. He was asked to come up to FantasyCon when it was in Glasgow. So he ended up coming through to FantasyCon for that weekend as well, and had some stuff on display there. So yes, he does that. And I just thought it would be a cool thing. Excuse me. I just thought it'd be a cool thing to have as a kind of semi-official authored photo. Would be a Victorian glass plate photo. So I asked him to do one for me. He's like, yeah, I totally want to do that. So we took a couple, and that was the one that I ended up using. It
does make you look like a serial killer from the 50s or something.
It's definitely really unusual, isn't it? I like it. I probably need to get one. I'm going to definitely have to change my Twitter photo because with the lockdown here coming up for FantasyCon, I should probably actually look like I look now, so that people can recognize me in person. Because there's so many people from Twitter who you'd be like, but you don't look like your profile photo. I don't recognize you. Yeah.
My author photo is also like 10 years old, so I need to get some new ones done. Yeah. I've aged in the interim a little bit.
Isn't it awful how that happens? It's just cruel, isn't it? Like, man, who designed this?
Just hanging around for the quickening. That's what I'm doing. Yeah. For the gathering. Yeah.
Good plan. I'm in.
Anyway, I think we've rambled on enough. Good luck with The Lost War. I look forward to hearing more news in the coming months, in the coming year, about what happens with the rest of the series and whether it gets a home somewhere. But as you say, book 2 is done. You're editing it. You got 3 and 4 to write. It's going to come out whatever happens. So
it will come out one way or another. The only question is how and when, really.
Yeah.
Whether it's if it lands with a publishing house, it's going to be later rather than sooner, obviously, because presumably Lost War will come out first. And if I say presumably, it'll have to. It won't get any bloody sense, will it? So Lost War will come out first, and then the book 2 will come out after that. So I don't know. It's a little bit up in the air. It's exciting.
Yeah.
Who knows what happens? In 5 years, we might be talking about the Netflix series. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not?
Might as well aim high. Eh?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for joining me tonight, and we'll see you all later.
Cheers. Thanks for having me. It's been good fun.
Good night, everyone.